Welcome to Ballsy, the podcast where I interview successful artists and creators on how they got the balls to sell their art and turn their practice into a profitable business. As a former entrepreneur turned artist, I realized that being an artist is basically like running a small startup. And you, the artist, are the CEO. I talk to artists about their businesses, talk real numbers, growth hacks, tools and tricks, and how they were ballsy enough to make that their career. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to Ballsy. Today, the person who had the balls to sell some art. How do I pronounce it correctly? Jochem?
Jochem.
Jochem.
Right.
Fantastic. So, Jochem, let's get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and a little bit about your art, just so we have some context for the interview, and then we'll jump right in.
Okay, good. First of all, thank you for having me. I think it's wonderful to reach out and connect with artists all over the world. So I'm Jochem Rotteveel. I live in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. That's not Denmark, in case anyone is wondering. Rotterdam is like a 45-minute train ride from Amsterdam away. If you ever visit the Netherlands, you should definitely check out Rotterdam. And I have been working as an artist for 12 or 13 years now. I do have a studio here in Rotterdam, and I did a lot of residencies all over the world, which I'm very privileged to do. I started out in art school with duct tape because I really wanted to paint actually, but I never got my hands around paint. So I was looking for materials that I could work with. So I added with duct tape. And I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago and reached a point where I couldn't really explore the material anymore that I wanted to explore. So I gave myself a year off. I canceled all the exhibitions that I was planning to do. And I just went freestyling in my studio. And then after a year, I ended up working with foil instead, adhesive foil, which is similar to duct tape, but I didn't know that at the time. It was just like a natural route, and I ended up with sticky stuff again. So the adhesive foil, it's 45 centimeters wide, 60 centimeters wide, 90 centimeters wide, and it's long as meters, as long as you want. And I make pieces, apply adhesive foil on debond panels, so like large aluminum panels, or I apply it directly onto the wall. So I make these murals. And my starting point is always using material as a way to paint, really. So I look at the paint. Yeah.
Your work has like a very interesting sculptural, yet like when I first saw your work, I didn't know whether it was paint, whether it was like actually foil would have been the last thing I would have guessed. Like I couldn't tell whether it was like the material or you creating kind of the sculptural lines and the painting. It's really fascinating work. It very geometric, very bright, like really good color contrast, really good color study. And I was particularly drawn to it, that the scale, which is one of the reasons I found you via Instagram. Speaking of which, make sure that your Instagram is so we can, if people are listening, they can look to see what we're talking about. I'll also post some pieces as well in the notes. Your Instagram is just your name, correct?
Yeah. That's right. That's right. Jochem Rotteveel.
And check the spelling on the thing because it's not as intuitive as it looks. So yeah, you've done this kind of unusual materials. I have to go back and try to track down some of your old work. I didn't realize the duct tape stuff. I like the fact that you've like evolved in like sticky tape like materials. That's super interesting. What did you do? So obviously the context of this is that like at some point you had the courage to sell art. So we're going to go backwards. So before you sold it, what did you do before you were an artist? And
I'm sorry. I studied communications. That was actually, I wanted to go into media. So I studied communications, I worked in agencies, in TV. But after 3 or 4 years, that wasn't enough for me. And I've always been very creative since I was a child. I could hold a pencil, I would draw. So I wanted to explore my creativity and I applied for art school. And so that's when I ended up doing art school when I was like 28. It's a bit later than the usual student.
Okay.
But that's when they enrolled me into art school. And I think it was around 2009 or so that I graduated. And during graduation, at the graduation show, I met 2 gallery owners from Rotterdam, and they were extremely nice. And they saw that the pieces that I was making weren't sellable at all because they were like duct tape on cardboard and you would have to hammer them into the wall with nails. And they would ask me all kinds of questions like, how do you expect people to hang this in their homes? And I said, I don't care. I just want to make this stuff. And they thought it was interesting anyway. So they asked me for the gallery. They invited me to the gallery. And that's when I started working with the gallery. But my intention was never really to make art that would sell. I always thought that as long as I make art that is interesting to me, then I don't care if people buy it or not. I have my daytime job, which is still in communications. So I would make a living. And then I thought I'll just make what I want to make. And
okay.
Yeah.
So your intention was to just keep your day job going and be creative on the side.
Yeah, actually, I was at one point I was working 3 days a week, and I was doing like the art practice the other days and the other time, and I was really spending a lot of time in my studio, and I would get really annoyed when the daytime job was actually pushing away the art. But yeah, you have to make a living, right?
So hold on, I have two questions for you.
Yeah.
Technically speaking, the first art you actually sold was a gallery taking your work.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's like super rare. Most people like struggle and fight their entire existence to like eventually get a gallery to rep them and then sell. You basically came out of our school, the gallery is like, yeah, we'll take that. Yeah. And so you're like, that's really cool.
It seems I would have never imagined, no, really, because I thought like I was making these large murals with all kinds of construction materials, large plastic foils, duct tape, and it was insane. And I just wanted to make it because I thought it was something new I had never seen before. At least I didn't know any artists that would really use that kind of material. So I thought I'll just start doing this and then I'll see where it ends up. Yeah.
Okay, so now you basically come out of our school and you've sold nothing except you have gallery representation. So you're in the gallery. So I'm going to make the assumption that we're going to ask that the trajectory of your career was very gallery driven. So
yeah, it was. Yeah. And the good thing was because the gallery I started with in Rotterdam, they were extremely nice and thoughtful. And they said, you know what, you make such exceptional work that people will need another 8 years to get used to this. But we don't care. We really believe in your work. So we'll gladly include you in the team. And they said 20% of the gallery artists are actually making 80% of the profit for the entire gallery. So they said, we don't care if you don't make money at first. You'll come in time. Just continue developing your work and just follow your own path. And then eventually it will become sellable. And they were right.
And at what point, how long did it take you before you were they were generating enough work and you were selling enough work where you were like, I could give up, where the day job was then encroaching too much on the art, you decided to give up the day job?
I think just 2 or 3 years ago. It was just before the pandemic started. Yeah, and it was just before the pandemic started and my work suddenly started to pick up. There were these art collectors mentioning my name everywhere in the media also. So I was really at a point where I thought this is never going to fly. And unfortunately, the 2 gallery owners from a first gallery in Rotterdam, they had deceased and they had a car incident. So unfortunately, they had deceased. I had switched to a gallery in Amsterdam. They had the same philosophy. They said, you just create your work, because I had a lot of exhibitions going on. And they said, we believe in you. You just continue going on like this. Eventually, we hope that you will sell. So I would maybe sell 2 or 3 pieces per year. And they were still happy with it. They said, you make nice stuff, just keep going. And so I think only 2 or 3 years ago, it started picking up and now it is selling. But yeah.
So I got a couple of questions. So you're making work this whole time. You must be building up a good amount of inventory that's filling up the studio.
And I was so anxious to get rid of it because I would sometimes just hand out pieces to friends because I would have like tons of work in my studio. I would sometimes take the work off and then use it again. Yeah. But now that's not the case anymore. Thank God.
Yeah. So was there a particular moment that or it just organically happened, or was it a change of material, or was it like press or Instagram? What was do you know, or do you think that there was something that caused that inflection point?
Yeah, I think the change of material into adhesive foil, it definitely changed the character of my work. And I think that I got a bit more grown up or mature, if you like. And I think I really believe in working with one gallery only because people know who you are, know where they can get your work. People really have to get used to your work, to my work at least. I think it takes a long time before people start really believing in my work, at least, because I thought foil, that's so flimsy and you can crash it. Do we really take the risk, even though it's not that expensive? So yeah, I think people saw it as a risk. And I think 3 years ago, I think maybe I had been around long enough for people to have confidence in that taking that risk might be worth it. And I think, my work may have been evolved to a certain point where also I was invited by galleries from abroad. And now also I work with the gallery in Madrid. And so maybe it's zeitgeist. I don't know. Maybe people needed color in their life. I don't know. All of a sudden, all the arrows were in the right direction, it seems. And and some press helped. Also, algorithms in Instagram help as well. So